I'm calling this meeting of the Mazomanie Village Board to order. The meeting was properly posted on March 8th. Roll call.
Harrop.
Here.
Beal.
Here.
Dearson.
Here.
Mickelson.
Here.
Sander.
Here.
Schlamp.
Here.
Springstead.
Here.
We have a full house. We have a quorum. We will conduct business. Item 4, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
By Les.
Second.
By Scott. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same sign. That motion is carried. Item 5, approve minutes from the last regular board meeting.
Motion approved.
Before you, maybe you withhold that motion a bit, I've got some just additions for the sake of clarity. Bottom of the first page, item 17, I'll give these to you so you can have my notes.
Oh, okay.
Mazomanie had over $1 million in insurance claims. SEMA would like justification for the substantial damage estimate figures. Just an addition. On the continuing on the second page, contrary to what we were told initially, we can adjust for higher or lower figures than they were calculated in the program provided, period.
Then they,
I've got it here for you.
okay.
Some residents are going from non-substantial damage to substantial damage. Dale Clemmy will add his name there. Then down in item 3, utility financial summary, the report was written. Ellers has recommended a 7% rate increase. And then item 2 at the bottom of the page, fourth line down, we were required to be permitted. I don't think an application is in at this point.
That's what Mark said.
He did say that?
I thought you said that there was an application in?
For the brush dump?
For the brush dump?
There's not an application.
Okay.
So
I must have
here-
heard it wrong.
So I'm going to give you that.
Okay.
With those changes now, Jeff, is there a motion for approval?
Sure. Make a motion.
By Jeff,
Second.
by Les. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Before I introduce State Representative Considine, is there anybody else that hasn't signed up to speak this evening that wants to speak? No one? All right, we're very happy this evening to have our representative in the Wisconsin State Assembly, Dave Considine, with us. Dave and his office was important to the village, working with Senator Erpenbach's office in getting the Department of Transportation off square one and finally getting our highway project scheduled for 2021. And I can talk about other favors you've done for us, but that was an important one to us, Dave. So we're glad to have you here. Dave's here tonight to talk about the governor's budget proposal. And with that, Dave, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and mostly I'm just here to answer questions, I guess. I mean, I think a lot of the things in the budget are really good and bode well. I think the transportation funding, which has been an issue in the past, if we make that through, if we increase it like we're planning to and make sure that all the money for rural areas and municipalities comes here instead of going to southeastern Wisconsin, which is what we're projecting to do, and increasing that 10%. I think that's a really welcome thing. And then the other thing that I noticed that I think might be very intriguing to people in this area is the whole proposal to set up a Department of Outdoor Recreation and to start pushing that through the state tourism budget and to really focus on the addition of outdoor recreation. And I know that this area is working on that with the Black Earth Creek, and I think that could be really beneficial for us in this area. I suspect you're wondering what's gonna happen with the budget and with divided government and all that. There is no way of telling you that for sure. My colleagues across the aisle are assuring us that we will have a budget by July 4th. That they're gonna get it done. I don't know what the holdup to that could be, if they're assuming that we'll get that done. I mean, they have the majority in both houses, but we had that last year and didn't get it done until September. But I'm understanding from our joint finance members that they are actually, last year I think the problem was more between the two branches of the legislature than it was with the governor's office. And my understanding is that the election of Governor Evers has maybe unified them a little bit. At least that's what our joint finance members sound like. So that's a strong possibility that maybe that will happen. Then the question is, what does Evers do? You know, do we find enough common ground that he feels like he can not veto the whole thing and can maybe veto a few pieces or not? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I just don't know. And one of my joint finance members tells me he thinks that there's a strong possibility we won't get a budget done in the 2 years.
Really?
But they've just started, you know, really just started. And he is a person who is usually a pretty optimistic guy. And I know before they started meeting, he was saying it was 70-30 that we would get a budget. And now he's saying it's 30-70 that we'll get a budget. That causes me a little consternation. So we'll see. I know one part of the proposed budget that is frustrating me a little bit, and I think it should frustrate you some, because I think it's the repeal of the minimum markup law to finance some of the transportation things concerns me a whole lot. And while I hate opposing him a whole lot, as the first governor of my party that I've worked with, I'm not in favor of that one. Because I think it's going to take away your small gas stations here along Highway 14, and I think you're going to lose a lot of business and commerce, and I know that that's the case in a lot of. So I'm going to fight that one in any way that I can, regardless of the fact that it's a governor of my party proposing it. Because I think that's a real concern to our smaller rural communities. I think we'll lose fast. Other questions?
Questions?
Yeah.
Dave, I like the option to increase the levy limit by 2% as an alternative to new construction. Is that likely to get bipartisan support? I mean, it's not anything that's going to affect the state coffers, but rather the municipalities themselves.
I think it might. And the reason I think it might is that I think our previous governor was a guy who really held the line on that stuff and forced everybody else kind of into it. I mean, that was illustrated in the whole transportation budget last year. When the Assembly and the Senate were fighting in the Assembly, I was kind of cheering for Speaker Voss because he was saying, we got to fund the roads, let's not kick it down the road, let's increase the gas tax now. So I think we might. I think there's a strong possibility, because my perception at least was that it was Governor Walker that was really fighting any, what did he say, no new taxes? You know, if anything, if you raise anything new, you got to decrease something somewhere else.
Sure.
So I think it has a chance.
What about the dark store loophole?
Two things on that. The first is that I served on a committee on property tax assessment, a study committee. And it became obvious we were never going to get what I would like to get, which is to close that loophole. And the governor's budget has a proposal that pretty much closes it the way that I think it should be closed. But again, I don't know where that's going to go. Okay, I know that there is significant support across the aisle to pass that, and I think we might. But the outcome of the Property Tax Study Committee that I was on, we got one thing through that was really my suggestion, because I was pulling my hair out. There were, and I don't have much to pull, but I pulled what there was left. We had 3 Walgreens representatives, their lawyer, the person who does their leases, and the vice president of Walgreens, was sitting there in the room with us as part of the study committee and has a vote. And it became obvious that that was kind of stacked against us to get anywhere that I thought was near a total repeal. However, I kept thinking, what can we do? And all of, by the way, our suggestions, there were 3 of them. I think only one is really substantial, and it's the one that I proposed, which is to encourage municipalities, the county, and the school boards to bind together and to say, we're going to fight this together. Because part of the problem is, I represent the town of Merrimack. They have 900 residents, right? They're going to fight with Devil's Head with a $200 million, dollar. They're not. It's impossible. But if Sauk County joined them, and if the Sauk Prairie School District joined them, and the Baraboo School District joined them, and they have the power of the Wisconsin Counties Association, the power of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, and the municipalities, they got a crack at it. It at least puts maybe a black bear in with a grizzly bear. I don't know, but it balances the scales a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think we'll get that passed. I really think that'll pass. And then it just depends on how much my colleagues across the aisle will fight with Speaker Voss. He was the real holdup to that one last term. But boy, there's a lot of push across the aisle and with their members as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm hopeful that will happen either way. But I'm sure that one piece is going to happen, which will give municipalities a whole lot more bang for the buck, and you can bring a lot more power into the room with you.
Thus far this dark store loophole has been pretty much confined to Walgreens and I think maybe Walmart. I'm sure there are others that are just sitting back in the weeds waiting to see what's going to happen before they jump in and take the negative publicity. Now, we've got that situation here in Mazomanie with Dollar General. The building is owned by a development group, totally disassociated from Dollar General. And that would be a loss of tax revenue to the village of Mazomanie if that loophole is perpetuated. And they're able to make the claim that if Dollar General leaves, what are we going to do with this building? I mean, it's designed for Dollar General and it isn't appropriate for other uses. So just to keep in mind, that's an important issue to this village.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning it specifically. I think I've been up to probably one of the most vocal Democrats in support of closing that one. Yeah. And it came to my attention because in my first term, the Restaurant Association came in and Ishnala from the Dells started talking about that, and I thought, oh man, if we get big restaurants, involved in this, it's going to be everybody. Which said to me, we got to stop this one. So I will continue that fight, and I'm glad for this specific example because those help. I mean, when I made the reference to the town of Merrimack and Devil's Head, with their hundreds of millions fighting against this community of 900 rural people, I was like, so that helps, and I'm grateful for that.
One more that's important to us, and that is the TIF districts, limiting the percentage of a TIF district's project costs that can go to cash grants to developers, limiting that to 20%. Give you an example here in Mazomanie. In 2009, Cardinal Industries built a substantial plant here. And at that time, solar was a big thing. They were going to expand, and we built a huge increase in our electric infrastructure. Well, solar went down because of the entrance of the Chinese into that market. And so Cardinal has since converted to tempering coated glass and forgone the solar aspect of their business. But when they came, we did a pay-as-you-go TIF with them, and they paid for the entirety of Wick Drive and all the utilities, the lighting, and so forth, with the understanding that because they were going to expand so much, that expansion would be given back to them on a pay-as-you-go basis. Now, if we had not had that pay-as-you-go, if the village had, and the village has never had any of our TIFs come to taxpayer expense, but conceivably, if the village had not gone a pay-as-you-go on that, the taxpayers could have been stuck with $1.5 million because the expansion never happened, and Cardinal has not been paid back any of that $1.9 million they put into that street and the utilities there. So another example, and this is not in your district, is in Barneveld. Vortex put in a huge plant up in Barneveld, 300 employees. That's all pay-as-you-go. The village could not have afforded that. So our financial advisor, Ellers and Associates, is telling us that this 20% limitation will impact pay-as-you-go TIFs, and our village, in order to attract industry, would have to borrow that money and conceivably put the taxpayers on the hook. So from our perspective and our experience in TIFs, the 20% limitation on reimbursements to developers would impact that pay-as-you-go TIF.
Okay.
And I can give you specifics if you need them at some point.
Okay. That's helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Those
And that's
are-
what I'm here for, and anybody else here, please contact me if you have concerns about anything, and it's not just the budget. I try to be available wherever, whenever, so.
Go ahead. Are there any other questions? Peter, you have one.
I do have one question, and more a concern than a question. The levy limits, Gary mentioned about the greater of the two under 2% or the net new construction. That's a great step for helping us. But what really needs to happen is, and I haven't heard a lot of talk about this, but tying the expenditure restraint to that increase also. Because if we're said, well, you can raise more taxes, but you can't spend any more, that kind of,
Yeah, we've done that to schools too, and it's.
yeah, I mean, the expenditure rate really has to go up with the levy limits
Right.
at the same rate so that we can actually take advantage of that.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions for Dave? You've got a captive audience, folks.
And again, if you have more, please contact me. I will make it a point to get here.
Well, you've been very approachable, and we've appreciated everything you've done for this village and helping us with our improvements. Thank you.
You're welcome. And my hope is that this forecast doesn't get us into trouble. I can tell you that the DOA has already contacted me because, you know, the projected things for here and for the Variable River, their projections just for the spring for flooding were, they have an eye out. And have, you know, so if you have concerns, if I'm not on top of it, call me, and you know, I'll call them because they came to me and expressed concerns about what might happen this spring with flooding. So they're aware that it might, and they're thinking about, they think that my district is one of the ones that might get hit pretty severely if everything falls wrong. I hope it doesn't.
So do we.
I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
And to the Baraboo Common Council, and thank you all for doing this. I didn't appreciate how much school boards and town boards and village boards, how much work you do and how much your responsibility is, and you get nothing for it. At least I get paid, but I appreciate what you do.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one other person registered to speak, Jacob Wells. Jacob, I don't think you're going to have much to say because I think where this is going is favorable to you. So I'm just going to hold, and when we get to the flood update, you've got anything to say, I'm going to let you speak at that time.
Sounds good.
Okay? All right. Are there any other appearances? I don't have any sign-ups. Item 7, Village President's Report. I have nothing. Item 8, Village Administrator Report. Listen, folks, if it's all right with you, you have it in your packet. We've got a full agenda here. Is it okay if we just move on? Okay, item 9 is second meeting. Item 10, 11, 12, and 13 is the second meeting of the month. Item 14, Lake Marion update.
Nothing to report.
Item 15, update on Mazo 2020 committee.
Nothing new to report.
Item 16, violations of property ordinance.
No new violations.
Item 17, flood update. You want to start?
I'll start a little bit, and because Mr. Wells is here, I'll start right away with that. We received your elevation certificate. You had dropped it off in the office, and I had emailed it directly to Dale Plumey, and he emailed it directly to Katie Summers of Wisconsin Emergency Management, who they are the ones that make the determinations on FEMA's behalf for this thing. She was favorable to it. Was a little concerned about that it might not be in the floodplain. And then I met with, and she had said what we should talk with our surveyor about. I met with Tony Walker and found out that the window wells are the lowest adjacent grade, not the land around it, even though it has to get up the land around it to get in the window wells, but whichever, it worked in your favor. So Tony, I had Tony amend his certificate. It got sent back to Dale, who sent it back to Katie. So that's in the works right now. At the next meeting, we are going to have the final approval of our final application, and right now with hopes of being able to have you added on to that.
Okay, what, if I can speak, what business is still pending to make that decision, if I could ask?
Even though Katie already said that we needed to get the window wells in there and we'd be fine, we still sent it to her. We haven't heard, like, yes, this is what we need, we're all good. So we have to get that confirmation from her there.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of those crossing the T's and dotting the I's kind of thing. It appears that everything, I mean, we did exactly what she asked us to do. I even gave Tony the email that she had sent Dale and me about what the certificate needed to say, and Tony says, oh, okay, I can do that. Right here's, I got the elevations for those, and I'll just change it right here. And so we did exactly what she had asked for.
Okay, and would be the 7th or the 8th property on the list if it were to go?
Right now, we have 5 signatures, and we've got 3 other properties that haven't signed, some because they haven't been able to, and some are right now leaning that they don't want to sign.
Okay.
So you'd be somewhere in that mix, but you'd be able to be added, hopefully.
All right.
At this point in time, barring any unforeseen circumstances, that yours would be included in the final application.
That's great news. Thank you all for your work on that.
Yep.
I truly appreciate it.
Yep. Anything further on flood, Peter?
Our FEMA deadline for projects was yesterday. We still can, they're still gonna be asking questions and getting details here and there. We have a couple projects that we still are waiting on the final amounts for, which is fine with him. We just had to have all the list of projects in and taken care of there. So that's all, we're rolling on that. Hopefully, we'll start hearing some news about that and then working to the point of collecting some money.
Sounds good. Moving on to item 18, old business, we have nothing. Item 19, new business, discussion and action for the award of contract for the 2019 street and utility improvements. Brian Berquist with Town and Country Engineering is with us. And Brian, you're a good starting point on this discussion.
Sounds fair. Evening, everybody. I have a letter.
And Brian, I have a map of it up there.
Okay,
So
perfect.
make it easier to people understand.
Can I ask, do you have a copy, Peter?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you got one, great. I'm sorry, I'm short.
We'll share. You have that.
Okay, thanks. You don't want to.
So at the risk of reading through the whole thing,
Yeah, okay.
I'll just kind of guide the group through it and certainly take any questions as we go. We took bids for what we're calling the 2019 street utilities project on Feb 28. It included, most notably, the storm sewer work on Scott Street. That is to accommodate the DOT project coming up in a few years. It's going to be a continuation of some storm sewer that was run through the Westland Promenade about 10 years ago. Added to that were two water main projects, one on Crocker, one on High Street. Those projects were driven primarily by 4-inch water main that has been a kind of a chronic check mark on the village's inspections from DNR and is also prone to breaking and really limits your fire flow capabilities. We took bids for that as one lump project in order to try and maximize economy of scale, just like any other purchasing effort. We did take some supplemental bid items. Those are bid items that may or may not be needed, but we like to establish pricing for that type of work in a bid scenario. Those are mostly related to poor soils or rock. There was some concern that given the depths of the storm sewer on Scott Street, particularly as we're crossing down that cliff on Exchange, that there may be a bedrock ledge there. So we did include some costs for that. Unfortunately, the soil borings were not able to be completed due to weather until after we had opened bids. The good news is there is no rock. There's no bedrock. But as we get into some of the permutations here, there are bedrock costs included in what I'm recommending to award. We just won't pay them. So the bids did not come in great. They are fairly close to our pre-bid estimates. However, our pre-bid estimate is not the budget for the project. We set the budget a year, sometimes 2 years prior, and our pre-bid estimate is a result of a number of things, most significantly the actual design, actual survey, actual inspection and depths and distances. But it also is filled in with modern bid pricing. We had several projects immediately leading up to this bid opening that week that showed we were going to be seeing higher than expected asphalt pricing, higher than expected pipe pricing. That led us to set that pre-bid estimate. We did get 6 bids, which is good. We have had projects in the past, Lake, downtown, Broadhead, where we get 1 or 2 bids. So it was encouraging to see that kind of activity. It also shows that we've got pretty tight bidding, which indicates that we've got a pretty good, this is the market rate for doing street and utility construction in 2019. You can see there are some additional columns there beyond the base bid. We had some some bid alternates, to try and provide some flexibility on cost. One of them was a pipe abandonment alternate. The existing storm sewer on Scott Street is no longer going to be needed. It's off to the west side. The new pipe will be down the middle. Our base bid called for digging that pipe out of the ground. So a separate operation to go grab it and dig it out and fill the hole back up. We provided an alternate to allow the contractor to simply fill it. You can fill it with either a lean concrete mix that flows, flowable fill, or you can blow it with compressed air and sand and just fill it. Our worry is always it collapsing in 80 years or something and someone forgetting it's there, so we want to fill it. So that was an $8,000 deduct to do that. We also included a spot curb repair alternate. Mark's got a kind of a pet list of a large list of multiple curb repairs that are needed throughout the village. And for the past couple of projects, we've been including that as an alternate in case we got good bids. We did not get good bids, but that's what that spot curb repair alternate, that would be allowing Mark to just go through town areas not on the project scope and say, this 15 feet's bad, this 30 feet's bad, go, 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 go. And then the supplemental bid total, as we talked about, was for poor soils and rock. The low bidder, under any combination of base bid, alternate bid, supplemental bids, permutations thereof, is Rural Construction. They're out of Dodgeville. They're a good contractor. We've worked with them in a number of communities and in the western Dane County, eastern Iowa, and northern Lafayette areas. So they are a very well qualified bidder. They did submit their bidder's proof of responsibility. Shorter than the required 5 days. We state that they have to be in 5 days ahead of time. Those bidders' proofs is a statement of creditworthiness. How many folks do you have? How much cash do you have on hand? That sort of thing. They did submit one, but 2 days in advance. We would recommend that be viewed as a minor informality and waived. So we are recommending an award to Rural Construction. However, back to budget. So the project is higher than the original budget by approximately, if you include a contingency, which we'd always recommend mentally keeping at this point. Given the size of this project, we're suggesting a 5% contingency. And engineering costs, we're expecting an overrun on a range of $247,000 in round figures, so a chunk. That is broken out amongst a few different funds that are going to be paying for the project: the water utility, stormwater utility, and your general, I think it's general funds.
Yes.
The street costs. So looking at it that way, the water portion of the project, which not only includes the piping, but the pavement above the piping, to dig the hole and repair it. That's about $170,000 over budget. The storm sewer portion, and that's mostly related to piping costs, increase in steel and iron. The storm sewer portion is about $120,000 over budget, mostly related to some additional depth we had to take on as the storm sewer approached Exchange Street. And the street portion actually is under budget.
That's fine.
For better or worse.
I used his numbers to start with.
So those are round numbers, and also include that contingency, and also include what I'm going to talk about next, which would be a potential award, which would be for the base bid, the pipe abandonment alternate, which is a deduct, and the supplemental items. Please do note that the supplemental items include that rock excavation that you will not need But given the way municipalities can award bids, kind of got to award all the supplemental items, and we just won't pay them towards them. Looking at different options with staff, the Scott Street work is pretty critical. It's a part of the village's agreement with DOT to provide a storm sewer outlet at Highway 14 at a certain depth and a certain size. So I think I would put out that that's probably needs to happen at some point between now and 2021. The water main work, you're not as committed to it, but it does need to happen at some point. So from a, can you lop some stuff off? Potentially. I would advise that that would be more of an immediate cash flow benefit. Given that it's part of a $1 million plus project, you are getting some very good competitive rates. So if there's a mechanism by which some additional funding could be obtained, I would recommend awarding the contract to Rule for that base bid, plus the pipe alternate, deduct, plus those supplemental items, pending a potential availability of funds. The bids are good for 60 days after they're open. So Feb 28 was bid open, they're good through April 28. So if you do have some time to mediate terms.
Mark, do you need to add anything?
I don't think you mentioned the spot curb repair, but that's comes out of a separate pot of money, so I would include that
Okay.
in the recommendation.
Okay. I did not include that in my arithmetic, just to be clear, so I can.
But based on the pricing, I would like to include it.
Now, if it's all right with board members, what I'd like to do is go next to item, let's defer the motion on this project, because I want to walk through how potentially we can pay for this overrun, all right? So with that, the next item on the agenda, additional electric projects for 2019. Peter has put together this one-page summary. And Peter, let's walk through, starting at the top, and explain this in detail.
Okay, when we get to the projects, I'm gonna have Sean explain it better than me. So we initially had $716,665 set aside in our revenue bond for electric projects. That includes the this year's projects, next year's projects, and also the Highway 14 project. What turned out is Sean realized there were some efficiencies by
Redone.
well, I was gonna, okay. So the approved projects that we finished in 2018 are $368,000, just $369,000. That means we have $347,673 left in the bond to use towards designated towards electric projects. What we have approved so far for next year is $200,000 for Highway 14 overhead to underground, and the disposal of the retired assets for $8,000, for $208,000. So there's $139,673 left in monies that had been set aside for electric projects in our revenue bond. Sean has recommended some projects. I'll go back to you, Sean, after I do the totaling, reducing what we have left over to another, well, totaling $62,600. That's leaving $77,000 that's still a surplus in that electric. In a revenue bond, when we first approved these, we approved these for water and electric projects. We did not approve them for specific projects, so we can move them around from water to electric. So that $77,000, if tonight or in the future we approve those additional projects, we'd have $77,000 to do this. We could move that to help cover some of the water costs in that, what Brian had just talked about for the streets and utility project. If we don't approve those 4 additional projects, we'd have $139,673 to apply towards those water projects.
So let's have Sean talk about those 4 projects, starting with the west sub relay. Just not in electrician's terms, but in
That's always hard.
as layman's.
Yep. So West Sub Relay Project, we're looking at, we've had a couple catastrophic events over by Cardinal because of relays coming out of West Sub. Fault current is very, very high in the settings. Looking at bringing that down to a reasonable level. So if there is something that causes a fault, like a mouse that got into Cardinal's cabinet, it's not quite so catastrophic. It's kind of very, very important. We've had 2 of them that's been very expensive. The system coordination and arc flash study. Because of the work that we've done here with the 4 kV system and potentially on Highway 14, looking at kind of a review of our relay system and the fusing, making sure everything coordinates the way it should. And also an arc flash study. It's something that hasn't been done since 2008, I believe. And kind of the way it is right now, everything's changed so much. We got to, in order to work on it, we need set guidelines for the employees that work on it safely per OSHA. So that'd be something that would be added onto that. Reconfigure circuits by the railroad tracks and Walter Road, also to go along with the projects that we've done already. Basically separating the residential load from the industrial load. In kind of layman's terms, anytime there's any kind of incident in the residential, it affects the commercial. Any kind of blank, and that's a big deal for these factories. They see any kind of shift in voltage, it affects them. So by separating them, that would prevent that. The overhead underground rebuild behind the old feed mill was basically our stopping point, or start point, however you look at it, for getting rid of that 4 kV system that we did this summer. Everything from the feed mill back this way towards the museum is very, very old, and we actually had a pole tip over there and fall through the roof of the museum when I was taking their wire off of it. It's in bad shape. That would be something that would be projected to be rebuilt.
Okay, let's stop there. So we have an excess of funds from our bond of $77,000. You can see that the possible 2020 projects of $436,000 are far greater than the cash we're going to have. That's going to require additional bonding at some point. So let's just set that $77,000 aside, and let's go to this summary. This is a multi-page summary. On the first page, GO bond, Scott Street streets, Scott Street
Actually, you don't
stormwater.
have it, it's on the screen.
Okay. That's why they were all looking with puzzled looks.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Would you like me to explain? Okay. So we have, in our GEO bond, we had 2 projects listed, and that one we had bond resolution, so we have specific special projects along with specific amounts. So the initial allocation for the Scott Street portion of it is $151,508. The Scott Street stormwater part of it is $244,701. We had an overage on the Whitechapel project last year. That is part of the streets project, so it's part of what this total is. And also we have engineering fees that have already occurred before we've approved any of these things. So these have all been taken out of the bond. So what we have left in the bond for each one of these projects is $106,000 for the street on Scott Street storm sewer. We have $236,375, and for the 2 water projects, we have $512,191. Mark, I had talked to Brian, and Brian had said that Mark had suggested that we had 60,000 in streets and 10,000 in sidewalks in the general fund, that we were adding to the available for that project for the streets, and that was in the spreadsheet that Brian had given me to start the work on it.
That's not accurate.
That's not?
I may have that wrong.
That is for some of the alternates that are in the bid.
Okay, he told me it was for the project, so I'm sorry that so, how, both of the numbers or just the sidewalk?
Well, the sidewalk would be part of that $16,000 alternate bid.
Okay.
Curb and sidewalk. We have 58,000 in our street fund this year, from what I've been told. And part of that would go to the continuation of Cracker Street to include the railroad, which was bid at 22,000. And the remainder, I would, as I have done in previous years, keep that as a reserve as our last.
That's why I was surprised, because normally you always keep those, you don't tie them into a project, you keep those for as
Right, my
needed,
fault.
so.
That
I did
may,
have that in my spreadsheet, I should not.
that may be part of the discussion of worst case scenario, how do we get this?
Okay, sorry, Mark, I was working off of what Brian had given me, I'm sorry. So, we're gonna have to add 70,000 to each one of these numbers then as we go, so.
Well, let's just continue on with
Right.
the numbers.
So, what we have is available left for the projects, which is 106,000, not 176,000 for each one of these projects. Total budgeted costs, this includes what Brian mentioned, the engineering and the 5% contingency. So we have a price for each one of the projects. The streets at 177, the stormwater at 365,918, and the two water projects for 692,553. The deficit on these would be what we have, what we'd have to borrow to borrow or find the money somewhere else to pay for these. And this is going to be 71,000 now instead of the 1,100, 129,543 and 183,26. Now we have part of what Gary had alluded to earlier. We had the surplus in that revenue bond, which we could apply towards the water. The with appears as with or without additional electric projects. With is if we approve those four additional projects, we would have an additional $77,000 to help pay for the water. Without it, we'd have $139,673 to pay for the water. But borrowing needs or finding them some other place, that's what we need down here. This will be $71,000 now. So that gives you what we would have to come up with. We have bond resolutions that for the GO bonds, and we have those two. So if we do go over that initial outlay for the storm sewer or for the streets, we'd have to borrow for that. We can't take it out of any other portion of that bond, and we can't take it out of the revenue bond. The water bond, we can move stuff around, but when we reach the maximum of the total bond, then we'd have to borrow or find another way of paying for that additional amount.
Okay, let's talk about the water. And let's talk that we're applying the 77,000 to the 180,000 shortfall, so we've got 103,000 left over. We do have a strong cash position in our water utility, but keep in mind that over the years, the general fund advanced these monies to sewer, and the water utility advanced to sewer. Sewer has a very strong cash position right now. Between the cash position in water and the sewer advance paying that debt back, we can take care of that 103,000. So I'm not concerned about the water side of it, folks. We've got the cash to do that. The $129,000 is storm sewer, and we do have a stormwater utility. Some of that cash flow from the stormwater utility is being used to pay for the bond costs. Go up to the top, Peter, if you would.
Sure.
Well, here. It's being used to pay for the 300,
What did I go to?
go down. It'll be used to pay for the 365,918. We do have excess money that we could use from that stormwater utility to debt service that 129. So really, folks, it's that 71,000 out of the general fund that we would have to work on. Now, keep in mind, there's a 5% contingency in here that may or may not be used, and there may be some cost savings that we could recognize in the course of construction, possibly.
Hopefully.
Usually goes the other way.
Yeah, I know. Mark?
With the 77,000 in that revenue bond hanging out there, and the 38,000 remaining of that 60, I feel like we should be able to cover any overages that we would. We obviously should have them covered by the contingency, but I usually try and have an extra way to back that up. And last year, we ran into a situation where we needed that. This is essentially 3 projects in one, and I think we'd be kidding ourselves to not have a backup plan.
Yeah.
But based on those 2 accounts hanging out there, I feel like we have it covered. Would you agree?
Yeah, based on what I'm seeing thus far, folks, I don't think it's a stretch that we could accept the bid as presented and recommended by Brian, and that we've got enough wiggle room here to get this taken care of without impact to ratepayers or taxpayers. Certainly on the water side, and the other 2, you know, if we've got a 10-year note, that's a minimal annual payment for that overage.
Another separate fund that I almost don't want to bring up because it's not completed and give any false hopes, but we have a different revenue bond that's funding a water project that I expect will be 40 or 50,000 under budget this year for the work in our municipal well houses.
For the backup generators.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's part of that revenue bond, but we had kept that placeholder at 130,000.
But of course, we can only use that in water or electric.
Right, correct, yeah.
Yep.
But once we get through this, that project wraps up, I maybe won't have to arm wrestle Sean quite as hard to keep everybody happy.
Sure. I think there's enough flexibility, folks, that we aren't doing a disservice to the community, to taxpayers or ratepayers in accepting this bid. So let's go back to item 1, action on the award of the contract. Discussion. Well, we should have a motion first, a motion and a second, and then we can discuss.
You have to know how much it's
Should I
going to be.
recommend something?
Yes, please.
I did some arithmetic, so recommending base bid plus the pipe abandonment alternate, plus the spot curb repair alternate, plus the supplemental bid total would get us to $1,107,165.50. That would be the award recommendation.
So move.
Motion by Jerry to approve the bid as presented by Brian,
Second,
second by Les. Discussion.
should we mention rural construction as the,
Oh,
Point.
right.
I was
That we
missing
would-
that, it should be the rule.
Is there discussion?
Would it be okay to have, for our next meeting, to have something more? I mean, this is good. I mean, like what we just discussed about where we're gonna put this and this and that.
Yeah, we can revise these.
Revise that,
Yeah.
just so it's more clear.
Peter put a lot of hours in on this, but now that this is done, I don't think it would take that much to,
No, I just gotta get, because
Yeah, I'll
Brian's
fix up
total is
my
different than
numbers.
the one I got from him earlier, so he and I have to work
sure.
on totals, and then I'll start checking what we have left in the stormwater.
Yep.
I think
utility.
it'd be a lot clearer for everybody.
Yeah,
Yep, we'll give you an update on that.
So our beginning dates and our projected end dates are,
Well, we don't have a beginning date because the contractor doesn't know they're doing it for sure at this point. But we had in the bid a start of,
We gotta have all work completed by the earlier of September 15 or 100 calendar days after starting work. Because we've got a large project area, Mark and I further broke it down into individual streets. So we wanted every street paved within 60 days of the start of the work on that street. I should point out that because we're disturbing such a deep hole, which would be wide hole, we're going to be recommending, and it's included in here, that only the first layer of asphalt be paved this year. That allows for any funkiness to happen over the winter, heaving, thawing, settling, what have you. The contractor would come and fix those under warranty, but then they'd come and pave it smooth and beautiful in 2020. Also included in this is, so we'll be about 1.5 inches short of blacktop. They're going to wing and wedge that up, so layperson won't even notice it. Mark will probably notice it when he's plowing snow, but so you'll see some action in 2020 where they come and grind off that little wedge and then pave it again. But September 15th, to answer your question.
And when we come back with revision, let's have that Crocker Street in here as well.
Crocker Street is in the base bid.
It's in this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. All right. Discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to accept the bid from Rule Construction for the amount that Brian indicated. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by the same sign. The motion carries. Okay. Item 3, this is a,
I still need item 2. Brian needs it to
Oh,
it
I'm
to be
sorry.
approved. I mean, not Brian, Sean needs it to be approved.
I'm sorry. So, we go back to this one sheet where we're talking about the electric and the approving the 4 projects that Sean is recommending totaling $62,600.
make a motion to approve.
Motion by Natalie,
I'll second.
second by Jeff. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed by the same sign. That motion is carried. Item 3, we're going to let Sue handle this one.
Okay,
Give us some
Tom.
history on this, Susan.
Tom Loudon is looking to divide his lot. I told him in order to divide the lot, I needed a certified survey map, or for the Plan Commission. He brought in this map that I had put in front of you, which shows an alley going through the middle of his property. He asked me why that alley was there. So I went to Dane County Planning. They said that they had found an intent to vacate that alley. But that's all they had, was the intent to vacate the alley. This does not show up on any of our maps.
It's an intent by the village.
By the village board.
Back in 1969.
Yes. Okay, so I went back to the date of the intent. I found where the board approved that. It went on for about 1.5 years, where it periodically came back And, well, first of all, they made a motion, the village board made a motion and a second, and approved vacating that alley. The next action they took was to rescind the motion that they just made. So then, over the next year and a half, they took, it came back periodically, they kept pushing it off, they would table it, until, I believe it was June of 1971, they thought it was a good idea to vacate this alley, and that's the last action they took. So they never did anything. They never completed it. So now I talked to Bill Cole, and Bill said that the best way to handle this, because, there's buildings over the top of it, the village is not going to be putting a street, or, completing that alley, would be for the board to basically do the initial resolution to vacate that alley. There's going to be 3 publications in the paper, and then the village board, after it's in the paper 3 times, then they can go back and approve the vacation of the alley, instead of going through the whole public hearing and everything else that they had to go through the first time.
So our agenda item is introduction of resolution 2019-1 to vacate an abandoned alley in the original plat of the village of Mazomanie. So Sue, are we approving this resolution tonight?
You are approving the introduction of yes, let me see. Yes. He says, introduction of resolution by village board at meeting, motion and second to introduce resolution number 2019-1 vacating unpaved alley. So we approve the resolution, from what I understand, and you'll basically be doing it twice. And then he wrote up what I have to put in the paper.
Are they approving the introduction of the resolution the next time they approve the resolution, or they approve the
It's,
resolution both
they're
times?
approving the resolution, I believe, both times, because that's the paperwork that I got.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion by Jeff and a second by Les to approve the introduction of resolution 2019-1 to vacate this abandoned alley, and then it will come back to us and we will
Adopt it.
adopt it.
There's 2 dates.
Yep. So it's introduced today. The motion is to approve the introduction of resolution 2019-1. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. All right, committee work. Personnel. Sue, do you want to talk about lifeguards?
Peter and Kathy Asik and I met with 3 lifeguards last week. 4 lifeguards. There are another 2 that are going to be interviewed tomorrow. And so we'll make our decision after that.
Okay.
We're going to be hiring 2.
Really?
From what I understand, the rest of them are coming back.
Oh, I see. Okay. Other than that, I don't feel we need a meeting. Public Works and Property, Ray doesn't want to meet. Parks and Rec,
Here's, we need a meeting. So my suggestion is the 19th or the 26th. So we need to have Sue or Tara there. Mark wants to be in, he can. Natalie and Jeff. And Les, you can come.
No thanks.
Tara
This
would be,
Tuesday.
Fine by me.
yeah.
Sooner the better.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You wanna do the 19th at, Jeff, 3 o'clock? 3:15, 3:30?
3:30 is probably good.
3:30 and then, is that all right? 19th at 3:30. We'll discuss park usage and scheduling. Is that broad enough?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Jerry. Item 4, public protection and ordinance.
I have nothing.
Finance.
Make a motion to approve bills.
Motion by Les, second by Scott. to
I just
approve.
have one question about the
Yes.
Exley invoice. Can you give us a little more about what that's about? What we had to do
Did you get those?
for the-
I scanned them in, but I must have forgotten. to
One is
send them.
about the bug tussle negotiations. I know, there's two.
Yeah, and then, oh, here they are.
I don't know what the other one was, but the first one was about bug tussle.
Preparation of ATV ordinance and phone call from Gary regarding stormwater mitigation questions. And that was the one for $663. The $1,767 was bug tussle.
Do we have resolution on that yet?
No, they have not gotten back to us since we gave them the information they had asked for.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Motion and second has been made. All in favor of the motion to approve bills signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by the same sign. That motion carries. Announcements. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
By Les,
Second.
by Natalie. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Thank you all.